Late Night with the Devil is a supernatural horror film that was released March of this year, 2024, and was directed by Colin and Cameron Cairnes. And of course, we are continuing our horror marathon for 2024 with this marvelous film. So let us begin. Before I get started, I just want to say, I've heard about this movie a while back, but I never was interested enough to watch it. And boy, was I wrong for that, because this film was great, and we're going to talk about it, of course. Now, one thing I liked about this film, or loved about this film, was the retro look of it, right? It genuinely felt like I was watching a 1970s late night talk show. It felt like that because you have the colors, you have what they were wearing, and even the set itself felt like it was the 1970s, right? So I think that they did a fantastic job of making it seem that way. I also like that when they went on breaks, right? They have like these breaks in between, commercial breaks. The picture turns gray and black, gray, right? White and black. Is it white and black or gray? Let's just say gray. It turns gray, and that basically symbolizes the commercial break. And in these commercial breaks, you get a little bit more information about what's going on behind the scenes and stuff like that. So I thought that was brilliant. This film reminded me of one of the episodes in the Netflix series Cabinet of Curiosities. If you haven't watched that, I recommend that as well. But it reminded me of a particular episode in that series, The Viewing, right? Panos Cosmatos was the director of that episode. This film and The Viewing, they have similar styles and effects, right? And that's something that I loved about this film as well as The Viewing. Very colorful, it has like a retro look to it, right? The Viewing, I think it also happens in like the 1970s or 1980s, and it has that retro look. The effects in this film weren't that great, but it matched the aesthetics of the 1970s talk show, right? It kind of looks fake. Like, it's not the best effects that, I've seen in a movie, but it matches the aesthetics of the show. And that's something that I loved. Now, after the intro, it's just a regular show, right? It's a regular show in the 1970s, and you're watching it, and you see the host, Jack Delroy, who is played by the actor David Dasmalchian. And I probably butchered that, so I'm sorry. Great actor. Great performance in this film. I absolutely loved him being the host. Very charismatic. He did a great job. I felt like everyone, the cast in this film, did a very good job. As I was saying, it's just a regular show, but it gets stranger and stranger as the movie progresses, right? It first starts off with this psychic who comes on. His name is Christo. At first, you're watching this guy perform, right? The psychic. He goes up to the audience and he's like, I forget what he was asking, but it's a typical psychic stuff. Psychics pretty much, they go up to an audience and like, okay, is there a Jim, Johnny, Jeffrey, and then someone's like, I'm a Jeffrey. And then they're like, oh, Jeffrey, do you have a pet? Maybe a dog, a cat, a goldfish. Okay. He kind of seems very phony, like a fake psychic. But eventually, he has this message. He gets like a painful headache, and he basically says like, I have a message. Does anyone know a Minnie? Does anyone know a Minnie? And then that's when Jack Delroy realizes that, oh snap, Minnie is the private name I gave to my now dead wife, Madeline, right? And that's when things really kick off. These are the memorable scenes that really stood out to me. First off, Christo begins to throw up in the middle of the show, and like I said, he basically starts everything, right? Christo is the one who kind of just begins with the strange happenings in the show. He begins to throw up black puke. Who throws up black puke, right? They should have already known, like, okay, this guy needs to go to the hospital ASAP, which I think he does, but he ends up dying. So poor Christo. And probably the most important scene from this film is when Lily shows us the demon within her. The demon she calls Mr. Wriggles because it feels like he's wriggling in her. That doesn't sound right. out of her. Anyway, his name is Mr. Wriggles, and he's basically the demon who possessed her, and he comes out in the scene. And I thought it was pretty interesting to see that in this talk show. I think this part, of course, is when you begin to really, get into the show itself. You forget that it's a show and you're just like glued to the TV. But to me, the most memorable scene from this film was when Carr, the hypnotist, hypnotizes Gus. And I thought this scene was so brilliant because when you're watching this movie, right, or this show, right, you're watching a show, he's hypnotizing Gus, and at first you don't think it's gonna work. Again, the effects were amazing, like when he does the little like watch and he brings his hand over it and it starts to, the little swirl comes out. I thought that was pretty cool. But at first you don't think it's gonna work out, but then Gus starts to get real uncomfortable. He starts to get hot. Next you know, he's picking out worms out of his neck, and there's a giant worm coming out of his head. I mean, oh my goodness. Like, I did not expect that at all, and I was freaked out from it. To see a giant worm come out of someone, it's not a happy scene, right? But that's not even the best part. The best part is that he snaps, and Gus like snaps out of it. Jack tells the crew to rewind it back to see what they captured. And when we're rewatching what happened, right, you get to see what really happened, right? So it seems like you yourself, as the viewer of the movie or the viewer of this show, feel like you got hypnotized as well, right? And that's why I think that this scene was the most memorable, the most compelling out of all of the scenes in this film. It feels like you're the viewer as well, right? You're the viewer at home watching this show back in the 1970s. That's why I love this show or this movie so much, is because you actually feel like you're a part of the movie itself. Now there's that scene. The other scene that I thought was the most memorable was when Jack sees Minnie, when he asks the crew to rewind to watch the exorcist part again, the demon part coming out of Lily again. And when he does that, he sees something, right? And when I first watched it, right, with a rewind, to me it seemed like Lily's head, it was turned towards Jack. But in a split second, it looked like it like twisted back and looked at the camera for a split second, and that freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, I saw something. That's not even the best part. The best part is when Jack, he asks him to rewind it again. He's like, oh, wait, go back, rewind it. And then they go again, and he's like, no, slow down. And they keep slowing it down. And then you see Jack in the scene, and behind him is the ghost of Madeline. And I was like, oh my God. Now, first off, she didn't look that scary, but it was so freaky to see that. And that's not even the freakiest part. The freakiest part was when they bring the camera, the actual camera, back to Jack for his reaction. You could see a hand on his shoulder, and it's obviously Madeline. And I thought that was like a double. Oh my God, that scene was so crazy and freaky at the same time. I also love the scene where the show cuts off and it turns into static, right? You think that the movie's over, or at least I thought that the movie was over. I was like, wow, that was crazy. Yeah, I was already satisfied with what I watched. But then through the static, you then see like this face coming out of the TV. And I was like, oh my God, that freaked me out so bad because I thought that the movie was over and that came out. I was like, imagine watching this. Now, I watched it by myself alone, but I watched it during the day. If I would have watched this by myself at night, I'd be freaked out. I'd be turning on all the lights of the house because that was freaky to me, because it seemed like obviously the demon was coming out of my own TV. But those were all of the memorable scenes that really stuck out to me. Now, talking about the ending was great. Could not have been better. The demon, you get to see the demon. And what I loved about that is that the demon didn't look like a traditional demon, right, with the horns and all that stuff. It was like this energy, right? This energy that was coming out of Lily, and it was very staticky and stuff. Again, the effects, marvelous. Now, the part that really stood out to me at the end was when Jack Delroy said, "What are you doing? Just turn it off. Like, turn it off. Stop watching this." And it was crazy because you're watching this movie, because you're watching the movie, but at the same time, it felt like you were in control of his life for that split moment. Like, if I would have turned off the TV, he would have been all right. But obviously, you continue to watch it because you're watching the movie, and you see everything, all these episodes that he was before, like past episodes, and eventually you get to the part where he sacrifices Madeline because she tells him, "Please, just kill me or sacrifice me. I'm done with this pain that I'm feeling." And he stabs her, and it turns out to be Lily. Now, that was a great ending because everyone has died. Lily was sacrificed by Jack, and that's it. That's the end of the show. Everything's just ruined. Probably one of the best endings of a film that I've watched. I honestly thought this was one of the best horror films I watched in 2024. Originally, Longlegs was my number one favorite film of 2024, but this movie goes toe to toe with it. And honestly, I think that this might be my new favorite horror film of 2024. I thought it was great. I thought it wasn't as scary as Longlegs or other films, but it was freaky. It was creative. Ultimately, I felt like this movie was just fun to watch. I had a blast watching this film, and that's why I thought that this film was a great film. Let me know if you agree. Do you think this is the best horror film in 2024? Do you think it was better than Longlegs if you watched Longlegs? But that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time I finish a movie or a book.